Um, Good afternoon, colleagues. I call this meeting to order. We're welcoming some. Do you have the new list? Oh yeah, okay. So we're welcoming some new members today. On the Conservative side, we have Mr. Kurek. Mr. Sheehan's with us for this meeting. Dreeshen, Mr. Dreeshen's here. Pardon? No. Yeah, no. Mr. Dreeshen is here in replacement. Then he's going to work on Natural Resources Committee. We have Mr. McLean with us, who's been here before, and Mr. Deltel, who's a member of the committee. He hasn't arrived yet, but he'll be with us as a permanent member of the committee. Before we start with the witnesses today, I would like to ask for unanimous consent to adopt the subcommittee report, which you've seen, which came out of the last meeting of the steering committee. So that's adopted. Fine report, yeah. I thought you were going to raise some objection. For a very interesting clean tech study. On the first panel, we have from the Canadian Nuclear Association, John Gorman, President and Chief Executive Officer. From Clean Energy Canada, we have Oliver James Sheldrick, Program Manager, Clean Economy. From the Institute for Hydrogen Research, we have Professor Bruno Paulet, and from Iron and Earth, we have Executive Director Luisa De Silva. Each panelist has 3 minutes to make opening statements. And we'll start with Mr. Gorman, who's online, I believe. So you have 3 minutes. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to be pretty strict on the time. So if I interrupt you, don't take it personally. It's just so that we can land on time at the end. Thank you. Mr. Gorman, go ahead.
Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of the Canadian nuclear industry. Reaching Canada's 2050 net zero target is going to require a paradigm shift in how we approach production, distribution, and use of energy in Canada. There are no easy solutions to this problem, and the scale of the challenge is not widely understood or accepted. What is clear, however, is that meeting this challenge will require the more rapid deployment of all available clean energy technologies, available technologies such as wind, water, solar, conventional nuclear, as well as the dramatic scaling up of emerging technologies such as hydrogen, small modular reactors, marine renewables, and long-term storage. In recognition of the massive challenge and the need to deploy both existing and emerging clean technology at speed and scale, the national associations representing all of the technologies I referenced have formed formal alliances and are jointly working together on policy positions to inform strong decision-making by this government. Nuclear power is increasingly being recognized as part of the solution and our collective climate challenge and domestic energy security needs. Canada has been a leader in the resurgence of the nuclear industry at home and globally. We are delivering refurbishments of our existing nuclear fleet in Ontario ahead of time and under budget. Small modular reactor projects are being actively planned and executed in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick. And our uranium mining sector remains critical to the world's nuclear industry. However, there is much to be done to enable nuclear power to play the role that is required for Canada to meet its targets. As this committee studies and considers the required policies to enhance Canada's clean energy sector, we recommend that Canada urgently requires the development of a clear clean energy industrial strategy. This strategy should include all clean energy technologies defined as technologies that do not exist greenhouse gases. As we outlined in our recent budget submission, nuclear technologies must explicitly and purposefully be included in all efforts to address the climate crisis and energy security needs. To enable Canada to meet the net zero targets, we recommend the following specific actions to support the industry. The inclusion of nuclear in clean tech tax credits programs, a clear and predictable process in the Impact Assessment Act to ensure timely deployment, support for uranium and CANDU nuclear technology exports to key countries such as Romania, South Korea, as well as support for the SMR initiatives in key markets such as Poland and Estonia. Recognition of uranium and other minerals that are used in the nuclear industry is critical to the clean energy economy in the clean mineral strategy. Financial mechanisms to support the development and deployment of nuclear energy and technologies, modernizing and aligning regulations, codes, and standards to facilitate technology development, deployment, and export, and recognize the development of hydrogen through clean energy such as nuclear as preferable to greenhouse gas emitting technologies. Through implementation of these support members, Canada will be putting nuclear on an even playing field with the other low-carbon clean technologies.
Merci, Monsieur Gorman. Je rappellerai à tous.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. I'd like to remind all members that you have, to all participants online, you have to make sure that the boom microphone should be high enough for interpreters to hear you correctly. I also should have mentioned that pursuant to the motion, the routine motion, that all online witnesses have done a sound test. So we are going to continue now with Mr. Oliver James Sheldrick. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ollie Sheldrick. I am the Program Manager for the Clean Economy work at Clean Energy Canada, a climate and clean energy think tank at Simon Fraser University. I am based in Toronto, Ontario. I'll be speaking today on how Canada can position itself to innovate and invest in the clean technologies required to reach our net zero goals, and in turn position us as a global exporter of the materials and products that will fuel the global clean transition. Modelling done by Clean Energy Canada has found that between 2030 and 2050, jobs in Canada's clean energy sector are projected to grow by almost 50%. By 2030, Canada's EV battery supply chain could support nearly 250,000 direct and indirect jobs and add 48 billion to the Canadian economy. Fully implementing green procurement policies, or Buy Clean in Canada, could unlock 14 million tonnes of direct and indirect emissions reductions and support a growing green buildings material sector that could reach 50 billion by 2030. But Canada has 3 challenges to achieve this. First, to support the existing clean tech industry by scaling the market for current technologies. Second, investing in innovation to ready the next generation of solutions. And thirdly, ensuring Canada capitalizes on its competitive advantages. In order to address the first challenge, Canada must increase its focus on driving market demand. Government can play its part here through clean procurement practices, or Buy Clean, as one of the largest customers for products such as construction materials. For example, buying over 1/3 of all the steel in Canada every year. The government has a strong influence and can spur widespread adoption and increased demand for low carbon products. And due to our low emissions electricity grid, many Canadian-made products are already lower carbon than their international alternatives. Government is moving on this, but our ambition and pace must be increased. For future clean technologies that will drive our near zero economy, we must continue to invest in projects that demonstrate what's possible. The International Energy Agency has found that while we have the technology to get the emissions reductions by 2030, to get to our 2050 goals, almost half those reductions need to come from technologies that are currently in the demonstration or prototype phase. Canada has the potential to be a green energy and green technology superpower. We have one of the lowest emissions grids in the world. It's 83% clean, abundant natural resources and critical minerals, vast freshwater reserves and geology for carbon sequestration, combined with a highly skilled workforce. These are the ingredients for cornerstone clean technologies such as green hydrogen, batteries, and CCUS. And we must harness these opportunities by firstly building a market for low carbon goods in Canada to support domestic producers and reduce emissions. Second, continuing to fund innovation. And third, building up Canada's competitive advantage as the first choice for clean tech development. With these actions, Canada can seize the opportunity of the clean economy and meet our net zero 2050 goals.
Thank you. Alors, on poursuit.
We are going to continue with Professor Paulet. You have 3 minutes.
Opportunity to present and interact with you this afternoon. I've been working in the hydrogen energy sector for more than 20 years, both in academia and on the industry in the UK, Japan, South Africa, Norway, and Canada. I strongly believe that the hydrogen will contribute to the ambitious decarbonization goal of 100% by 2050. Although I would like to emphasize that hydrogen is not the silver bullet for decarbonization in all sectors. It is part of a portfolio of several low carbon energy technologies. For now, the primary focus should be on targeting industries and sectors difficult to decarbonize, the so-called no-regret sectors, especially the energy on carbon-emitting intensive industries on heavy-duty transport. However, we are currently facing many challenges. One, we must accelerate the deployment and capacity of low carbon intensity hydrogen technologies on renewable energy systems and work internationally with provinces and municipalities to accelerate the development of clean hydrogen code and standards. Two, we must engage with stakeholders, including indigenous communities, and quickly implement community-led clean energy projects. Three, we need to innovate in low-cost and highly efficient hydrogen production technologies with better integration with renewable energy systems, better hydrogen storage, and hydrogen transport systems. Four, we must focus on local strategic minerals and sustainable materials for clean energy for the heating, transport, and industrial sectors, as well as innovations in recycling. Five, we must implement policy on funding to support low-cost clean hydrogen production in line with the US Inflation Reduction Act that allow Canadian manufacturers and project developers to compete for investment, develop and retain human capital, and create jobs. Six, we need to attract international experts and put in place a faster and much more efficient immigration process. Seven, we must also invest in extensive R&D programs and state-of-the-art R&D infrastructure to validate the technology, to generate innovation, IP, or new industries, as well as investing in training programs to train the next generations of hydrogen and clean energy and engineers, scientists, technologists, and economists. Canada is really blessed with vast territories and an abundance of water, minerals, natural resources, abundant renewable electricity generation, and of course, natural oil and gas. These are perfect ingredients for building a strong clean energy value chain and economy from mineral extraction to clean energy generation. However, Canada must act very rapidly to deploy commercially available clean energy technologies, accelerate the development and deployment of emerging technologies, and develop innovative solutions while ensuring access to clean, affordable, and modern energy services to all Canadians that also include Indigenous communities. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Paulet. We go now to Ms. De Silva, Executive Director of Iron and Earth, for 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, esteemed committee members, for inviting Iron and Earth here today. In 2021, 42% of Canada's greenhouse gases came from burning fossil fuels for transportation, agriculture, and building or water heating. In Canada's 2022 budget, the two big ticket items are EVs and CCUS, with CCUS receiving almost 4 times more funding than clean electricity initiatives. Despite federal and provincial governments providing an estimate $5.8 billion for CCUS projects since 2000, CCUS only captures 0.05% of Canada's greenhouse gases. Canada's old energy systems are too centralized and not community-focused. So what Canada needs to do instead is we should simultaneously improve worker well-being and community resilience towards climate change through green housing initiatives, retrofits, community distributed energy projects, and zero-emission mobility. Iron and Earth addresses these goals. Our programs have national reach, from the traditional fossil fuel communities in Alberta to remote diesel-dependent communities in northern Labrador. Our programs are focused on community capacity and local sustainable job creation that empower workers to build and implement climate solutions. The growth of a skills base to meet this challenge is critical, but it is a question of the distribution of these skills closer to the need, closer to home, and available across the breadth of the nation. Currently, in spite of having the baseline skills and a desire to work in the net zero economy, fossil fuel workers and Indigenous communities lack the opportunities to play a leading role in building the policy and infrastructure required to reach global climate targets. The United States recently announced the Inflation Reduction Act, where of the $158 billion towards clean energy solutions, we see that 48% goes towards home energy efficiencies and community resiliencies, whereas only 2.3% of that budget goes towards CCUS. The solutions that Canada needs in the energy transition exist here at home. I agree with my fellow speakers. We are rich in natural resources. We have solar, wind, geothermal, you name it, Canada has it. With a looming recession and Canadians worried about inflation and job stability, Canada should make investments that create projects across Canadian communities. Increasing local jobs and local economies prevents a Canadian energy worker diaspora flying across the nation to work and builds resilience against the boom-bust cycles associated with oil and gas export economy. Canadians who have worked in the energy sector are mobile workers. Not only have we traveled across Canada for employment, we have also used our highly sought-after skills internationally. Canada needs to create opportunities within our borders for these skilled energy workers to upskill to a clean economy, or Canada runs the very real risk of clean energy skills drain, leaving the nation bereft of skilled workers and left behind in the energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We got started late, but we have to finish on time. Often when we start late, we go a little over time, but this time apparently we can't. So I'm going to have to improvise a bit and change the allotted time for questions. So and we'll see how it goes. For the first round, we'll do 5 minutes instead of 6. See where that leaves us. Bonjour, Monsieur Deltel. So we'll start with Monsieur Deltel. Bienvenue au comité.
Welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. It's a pleasure for me to join this committee. Thank you for welcoming me. To those of you who are appearing from a distance, welcome to your House of Commons. My question is for Mr. Gorman.
Nuclear energy. By the way, there is an interesting report in the Journal La Presse le 10 octobre talking about this file and the Quebec perspective, which is quite interesting. Ma question pour vous, Monsieur Gorman.
My question for you, Mr. Gorman, is this. You talked about the CANDU reactor. This is technology from the 70s, but it seems that the world industry, nuclear industry, is focusing on SMRs. I would like to hear your opinion on this.
Through you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. And I hope that the sound quality has been addressed. Can you hear me? Mr. Detel, thank you for your question. If I may, you're right. The CANDU technology, a Canadian technology, was matured in the 70s, exported to 7 nations around the world, and we continue to do both refurbishments of those as well as have new build opportunities in places like Romania. What's important to know is that through the work that we're doing around refurbishments and the continual work we do with conventional CANDU technology, there is constant improvement in modernization and digitalization of those assets. So the CANDU technology continues to evolve and is still world-class. Small modular reactors, you're correct, a lot of emphasis on that, and Canada is a world leader. We have technologies that are being deployed now, as you know, in Ontario, with the GE Hitachi model that will be connected to the electricity grid by 2028, and we will see that same technology rolled out in Saskatchewan and Ontario in multiple units, as well as a number of other advanced technology that are coming out. So Canada needs to maintain that nuclear leadership.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gorman. So what I do understand from your testimony that we can do both, the SMR and also the CANDU. Maintenant, j'aimerais...
My next questions are for Mr. Paulet from the Université du Québec à Trois-Rivières. Hello. Hello. You listed 5 recommendations. Thank you for doing it in point form. You talked about the IRA. What are the concerns that Canadians should have about this American legislation that we've been talking a lot about in the context of green energy? Answer: well, this is very attractive to investors. There have been many statements like $3 per kilo of hydrogen. So this is very attractive to investors. If you have a large-scale project that needs to be scaled up, this becomes something that is very attractive. I hear people in the community, in the industry, people who are working in this field they feel like they're missing the boat if they don't have financial mechanisms that resemble those in the United States. So this is a great concern. We could also lose laborers instead of attracting it here in Canada. So this is another important issue in the hydrogen sector. We have a labor shortage, a skilled labor shortage. This is very concerning in this sector. I think I have time for one more question. In your last recommendation, you said we needed to act quickly and accelerate access to clean energy. Can you give us examples of things that the Canadian government should and must do? Yes, there's the implementation of renewable energy systems that can be very strategic. If we want to produce green hydrogen, we can take inspiration from our German friends. We need to focus on technology, think about our wind capacity of solar farms. And of course, hydroelectricity is very important. Let's not forget something like 83% of our electricity is very clean already. And this is something we can use to build and implement. Unfortunately, I have to stop you here, Professor. Ms. Taylor-Roy, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our witnesses for being here and being here in person, and welcome to the new members of our committee. This is a very diverse and interesting panel, and I have so many questions I could ask. But I think I'd like to hear from all of you, I think, briefly on what you feel are the best ways of helping us move forward under a number of criteria. So one is proven technologies that we're quite sure will actually work and get us to where we need to go, that have the largest environmental impact, if you will, in trying to meet our goals. But also, I think it was you, Mr. Sheldrick, who talked about building a market for low-carbon goods. Incorporating that and our ability to export, because as we know, we need to help build the private sector. The government cannot do all of this on their own. They cannot possibly fund this. We're all concerned with government expenditures. And I think the two additional things are leveraging private sector resources to do this, as well as ensuring that this is a fair and just transition. So there's a lot of goals we're trying to reach, and we're trying to reach them quickly. So you're all here with different perspectives. I'm wondering what your suggestion would be if we, for one or two things that you believe meet those criteria, that it's proven, has a huge impact, fair and just, we can leverage private sector resources, and there's a low-carbon market out there for it, or we can create it. So perhaps we can start with Ms. De Silva, since you're in the room.
Absolutely, thank you. Proven technologies that are on the ground that would be able to be implementable right away. What comes to mind is solar and wind. You know, we have plenty of this natural resources here in Canada. It would also benefit many of the communities that right now are completely diesel dependent, and they have no other options. It's also part of reconciliation for Indigenous communities, being able to give them energy sovereignty. This is something that the private sector is very much wanting to get involved in. I mean, I think the latest numbers I saw was 695,000 people working in clean energy, and those numbers are growing. In 2020 alone, it grew by 5%. So the demand is definitely there, and the private sector is moving into that area to make investments, and where investments come, the jobs will follow, and it is a lucrative industry to move into. So I think that those are the obvious examples. And then in terms of the technologies that we are still sorting out, we have a lot of promise within certain areas, like hydrogen, for example, which would, for example, help to save on electric vehicles, because people that live in high-rise buildings won't be able to charge their electric vehicle. But if you have a hydrogen-powered car, you'd be able to fill that up in the same amount of time as a fossil fuel vehicle. So there are, we need to explore those technologies more, and we also need to get started with the ones that are already proven. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Sheldrick?
Thank you. On the point of government spending and creating markets, something like Buy Clean, actually, although understanding your point about not being, being concerned about government spending, a lot of this is our ability to leverage spending that is already happening in other spaces. So spending on infrastructure, building bridges, building roads. We're going to be spending this money. If we bring in that Buy Clean element, which through a lot of analysis is only adding 1 to 2% increasing in the overall project costs, you can be buying significant volumes of cleaner steel, cleaner cement. And once you sort of start building that market out, you show that there's a demand, there's a clear buyer. Those products become more mainstream, and then the private sector comes in and starts buying those at greater volume as in and of itself, because it becomes the default in the market. So there's an opportunity for the government to leverage existing spending to also leverage private industry to expand their own use of clean materials. And as I mentioned, there's also a real clear benefit to Canada's producers, as we mentioned in multiple places. Our cleaner grid means we're already some of the lowest carbon producers of a lot of these materials anyway. So there's a clear advantage there to support Canadian businesses. On the point, sorry, go.
My time's running out. So Mr. Pellet, could we go to you next?
Yeah, I completely agree with Mr. Sheldrick's comments on this point here. And the most important thing is actually really to create that market. And we have customers out there who really want to really produce, the products, the green products. But what they always say, where can I get access to this hydrogen or green hydrogen? And this is really the bottom line here. And again, it's really try to increase.
Thank you. You'll see that the bells are ringing. We can't hear them, but I would ask members of the committee for permission to continue until we have 5 minutes left to vote. 10 minutes? I don't want to lose any time. Of course, we'll vote online.
For the vote in the House. So.
Okay. Is that so? There's no unanimous consent. So until you want to give it till 10 minutes before? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we'll go to Madame Posé pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, mais... Thank you. Thank you to our witnesses, and welcome to all the new members of the committee. This is a very collegial committee, and so this will be a lot of fun. Mr. Pellet, my questions are for you. First, I'd like to congratulate you. I learned that in July, you have received the honors of the International Association for Hydrogen Energy for your work and your research on innovative materials related to development. You've also been invited to join the Council of Engineers for the Energy Transition by the UN. I think this is really worth congratulating. Thank you. Thank you for your work. Canada published its Canadian hydrogen strategy. We say that it's ambitious, that will be carbon neutral, Canada will be at the bleeding edge. But 90% of hydrogen we produce is from fossil fuels. That's not how we're going to reach our targets. And I think that with you, we are understanding that hydrogen is a choice material when it comes to carbon neutral material that's renewable. So how can Canada continue to make giant leaps with green hydrogen? As I mentioned in my earlier statement, what I see is the use of various technologies to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Hydrogen is not a silver bullet that will solve all of our problems and take out all of the carbon. We need a plethora of technologies like batteries. Also, we're talking about hydrogen with CCS. So this hydrogen, there are some areas where it's very difficult to decarbonize, of course, with everything to do with heavy transportation. The interpreter would like to mention that the wrong microphone is on. Inaudible to the interpreter. I'm sorry, the microphones were swapped. I don't know if you heard me, Mr. Paulet. Currently, things are coming from hydrocarbons. So what can the federal government do to promote green hydrogen? We need financial incentives to increase capacity on the Canadian territory. Everything that's to do with wind energy, solar energy, and more. There's also an electrolyzer. This is a machine that we don't hear about a lot. There's mega factories in Canada. If we want to compare ourselves to the United States or Europe, you'll have heard that the French government has announced the construction of 4 mega power plants that will be so important for the French economy. There are 2 things here. One, increase capacity of renewable energy in Canada, but also to increase the production volumes of these electrolyzers that are so important for this field. Indeed, that's the first time I hear someone talk about this. We invited an academic here as a witness. He said one of the major obstacles to the adoption of renewable energies is the lack of support to innovations in this field. So we had technological, economic, regulatory, and administrative hurdles that were in place. So in your opinion, which are the most difficult to cross these hurdles? With technology, we always need to improve efficiency and the cost. Right now, these electrolyzers are very expensive, but if we increase the volume of production, we'll see the costs of production go down. For example, in China, they can produce $200 or $300 kilowatt electrolyzers. So there's a lot that can be done. The other thing is that we need financial incentives for Canadian entrepreneurs who would like to produce these machines at scale. They need a boost. Thank you. We'll move on to Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the new members of our committee. My first question is for Ms. De Silva. And, energy workers are facing a transition away from fossil fuels, which is understandably creating a lot of anxiety. On the other hand, there are so many potential jobs in clean energy and clean technology. How do you see the federal government supporting the needed move where we match workers and their existing skill sets with the jobs of the future?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the federal government needs to put investments into creating projects, and those projects are then what create the opportunities for the jobs. In speaking with people on the ground, and talking to them about the opportunities even just for transitioning, some people are becoming reticent to move over because of the looming recession, and they'd rather stay with what they know than take a chance and go somewhere else. So if you make it look more attractive to move towards something, I think that you'll see the movement of workers.
Thanks. We need to make sure the jobs are there. The Alberta Federation of Labour just is calling for urgent action to reimagine the energy economy into a clean economy and a clean technology economy, especially in light of the U.S.'s recent action on the Inflation Reduction Act. How might Canada be left behind if we don't act with the to match the scale and the urgency of this?
Yeah, it goes back to what I said in my introduction, which is when the fossil fuel workers, we just follow the jobs, and that's what we've known for years. So wherever the jobs are, if it's within Canada, in the U.S., international, we go where the jobs are, and that's what we're used to. So if the U.S. goes into a boom from the renewables and clean energy, I suspect that fossil fuel workers will follow the trend and move towards the jobs. It will leave Canada behind because right now we have a skilled workforce that can be implementing the energy transition, and that is found in the existing energy workers. They have been working on the ground and they know everything that's necessary. So we should be helping these workers to transition into the new jobs.
And you've talked about the need for real projects. Do you feel like the approach that the government has been taking so far has been matching the scale of what we're facing?
It's the money needs to follow with entrepreneurs, I think, and you need to be putting the funds towards being able to create the projects within the private sector. So the government putting funds towards an upskilling program, for example, like the ESDC program is fantastic. That's what will get it started, but there needs to be that funding to follow through for the private sector to take on the projects.
We've heard some interesting developments in clean technologies and the need to rapidly deploy climate solutions that are already available. We've also heard a lot about the concern about the availability of workers. And one example is the Greener Homes Grant. The government is running into the issue of not actually having enough energy advisors and auditors to do the required evaluations. Can you talk a little bit more about the issues of workforce development?
It's actually a problem that's going to compound. I'm sure everybody in this room is aware that people that work in skilled trades are also going to be retiring, and there's going to be a shortage looming on the horizon. So we're going to see a compounding effect there because often it is the skilled trades workers that work within these positions. So the commentary is there is this real urgency to get skilled workers into this industry because otherwise we will be facing the shortages, and that means we won't be able to move forward with these technologies and we will be falling behind.
And you talked a little bit about the kind of scale of investment in CCUS. What does it say about the priorities when you see that mismatch in terms of scales of investment?
For me, what it speaks to is that the oil and gas sector has been very dominant in Canada. And there is this infrastructure that's already in place. And so looking to find a solution that fits within the existing infrastructure would be CCUS. But CCUS can't be that silver bullet. So the volume of investment that has gone towards CCUS is disproportionate to the available renewable technologies that are out there that will actually make a difference. CCUS, it removes a lot of the carbon at production, but then the fuels are still burned, so then it still produces all of the fossil fuels.
There are some pots of money available for clean technologies.
I just have time for like a comment.
Well, just a theme that's clearly emerging is a need for an industrial overarching strategy, and I hope that we get further opportunity to talk about that.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much on that. We're going to suspend. And we will start again exactly 10 minutes after the vote result is announced. And we'll see how far we get. We won't have a lot of time left, but we'll see what we can do. So I suspend until 10 minutes after the vote is announced. Vote result is announced. Thank you. Is there any objection?
We will begin. We have to reduce the time for opening remarks to 90 seconds. This will allow us one round of questions of 4 minutes for each party. And this will bring us to 5:30 on the dot. Normally, we would be able to extend the meeting, but unfortunately today it's not possible.
Oui, Monsieur Kirk.
Is Mr. Kirkpatrick there? Mr. Kirkpatrick, can you give us your opening remarks within 90 seconds?
I will do my best, yes.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. It's Jamie Kirkpatrick with Blue Green Canada. I'm joining you from Saskatoon, Treaty 6 territory. My organization, Blue Green Canada, was founded in 2008 when Canada's prominent environmental and union organizations agreed that we can create good jobs and maintain good jobs and have a healthy environment across the country. We can be making and building renewable energy, using energy more efficiently, decarbonizing manufacturing, and electrifying transportation. And we can do that protecting communities and involving workers developing these technologies. Now, we're going to talk a lot about clean technologies and hear about the shiny details of those things. I've heard the previous witnesses speak about ways to reduce the CO2 per barrel of oil and improvements in nuclear technology, but I haven't seen anyone from workers' organizations or anyone related to the actual doing of these things present to this committee. And I just would encourage in future rounds, if possible, to really make an effort to hear from those workers in these sectors today and those that will be making the transitions to use the clean technologies we're talking about. The workers that are in the oil and gas sector now always hear about how important the sector is, but they see the job decline per barrel of oil. They see profits increasing, but not jobs increasing in their sector. Automation takes away those jobs. And that's clean technology in some cases. So there needs to be important considerations for the workers of today and the communities that they're in through just transition programming and planning.
Thank you very much. You've made the point very
90
succinctly.
seconds. Thank you.
We'll go now to Mr. Doer, who's here with Mr. Spady from Carbon Connect International. Mr. Doer, for 90 seconds.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to appear before the committee and discuss Carbon Connect International's implementing clean technologies in Canada.
Last year, under contract with the Province of Alberta Department of Environment, we implemented and designed a baseline measurement program and a technology implementation program funded entirely by the carbon levy of large emitters in Alberta. And we provided program management for over 80 emissions reductions projects, real projects in Alberta. 15.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent were saved, all for the sum of $40 million. These use off-the-shelf technology, existing service providers, created clean tech jobs, and many of these were in small communities. We did that.
One of the big issues is how do we continue this momentum? One of the things we'd strongly encourage the federal government to do is to continue to fund methane emission reduction technologies, the implementation of those technologies, and take advantage of programs that are occurring across the country that are working right now. Just top those programs up. The other key thing is, given that Canada is a world leader in methane emission policy, regulatory, and implementation, and we've been that way for a long time. Let's take that to the world. Let's internationalize this, get our technologies into other jurisdictions, and help elevate the industry around the world, not just in Canada. We've done it in Canada. We're continuing to do it. Taking that internationally, we can do that with a lot of existing resources. We do with our international financial.
I'm loath to interrupt the former mayor of Calgary, but it's a tough job I have.
Now we're on to Mr. Letourneau from Kruger Energy Inc. You have 1 minute and a half. Your microphone is off.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me now? Yes. So sorry. Sorry for the technical issues. Thank you for this invitation. Kruger Energy was founded in 2004. We're wholly owned by Kruger. We have over 115 years of history. We're a family company. Since 2004, we've been specializing in renewable energy power plants. We manage and operate 42 production sites for hydroelectric, wind, energy storage, and solar power facilities to biomass. I'm Jean Letourneau, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives and Community Solar Development. I'm currently leading the development of the following sectors. Community solar subsidiary in the Northeast United States, first solar project in Guatemala, and responsible for a pilot project there. There's three main points I'd like to make. One, we need long-term predictability for renewable electricity needs to avoid the stop and go, and we need to involve and integrate host communities and social license, including Indigenous people, and we need to foster a suitable and competitive environment for each renewable energy technology.
Millen from the Silicon Valley Bank for 90 seconds, please.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for having me. My name is Graham Millen. I'm the Managing Director of Climate Tech and Sustainability for Silicon Valley Bank in Canada, where I lead SUB's efforts to support and nurture the growth and success of Canadian clean tech companies. Prior to working with SUB, I dedicated over a dozen years to the financing, building, and operating of clean tech companies and clean energy projects. For those who don't know, SUB was established about 40 years ago to be the financial partner for the technology and innovation ecosystem. We now bank more than 40,000 tech companies globally, including 50% of all VC-backed companies in the United States, as well as more than 3,000 venture capital and private equity funds themselves. As a result, we've got a pretty unique front row seat at the intersection of innovation and capital. SUB has been committed to supporting the Canadian tech companies for the better part of 20 years, culminating in successfully receiving our Canadian banking license in 2019, now with a team of 50 across Canada, backed by a global team of 6,500 people. The global and Canadian venture capital markets have been extraordinarily active in recent years, with a record $15 billion deployed by venture capital funds into Canadian tech companies in 2021. And despite current market volatility, the Canadian and global tech market remains resilient and well capitalized, with $7 billion of new investment already in 2022 in Canada. North American venture capital reserves sit at a staggering record of over $270 billion. Trusted programs like SCDC, IRAP, and SHRED have been mainstays of enabling and the development and early demonstration of critical technologies, particularly in clean tech. However, there remain two critical drivers to support the clean tech sector's ability to meet our climate objectives while ensuring we build a robust, competitive economy.
Okay, thank you.
First, access to capital.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we have time for one 4-minute round, but really 4 minutes max. So we'll start with Mr. Dreeshen.
Mr. Chair, and certainly, thank you to all of the witnesses, and hopefully, you can send in some more information if you feel that you didn't quite have enough time. But Canada has some amazing entrepreneurs, and Canadians, we care about our water, they care about our land, they care about the air, and they expect everybody to treat our amazing resources responsibly. And in order to do that, as I've said many times, we have to make sure that we measure any kinds of projects or anything that we do, from the first shovel that we have to dig something up to the last shovel to cover it up. And I think that's really what's important. And again, with Carbon Connect, you're talking about those metrics, and that's what's critical. And not only that, you're talking about how the rest of the world can benefit from that great technology and the entrepreneurs that we have. So I'm wondering if you could take from that perspective and discuss how managing those metrics is important and how we actually fit in on the global scale.
So in 2018, and for the year and a half on each side of it, so 3-year term, I was the international president of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. I traveled to 49 different countries, about 75 visits, and I can guarantee you that the Canadian system and the policy we've got in place for 15 years is the best. And there are very clear metrics in the world, and we follow them. OGMP 2.0 is one, and we're there, and the rest of the world is not. So how we do it and how we influence the cradle to grave, the shovel to bury, is we have our good practices shown throughout the world, and people are asking for it. We just need to be there. We need to be there with the trade commissioners. We need to be there backed by the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank and the IFIs with Canadian dollars already in those banks. We need to be there globally to show that if they do what we do, they will be meeting and exceeding the global UN standards for the methane reduction.
Thank you. And I guess to that same point, we talk about greenhouse gases, and of course, whether it be water vapor or methane or carbon dioxide, all of those things are being measured. The intensity, of course, when we're talking about methane is something that I heard in your discussions that was most critical. Can you give us some idea of some of the methane collection or the projects that you're aware of and things that we are doing for funding?
Well, I'll start and I'll probably let Al finish. So in the world, nobody measures. We measure in Canada. The Americans like to talk about it. The Europeans like to estimate. But we measure. And we need to talk about that globally. I'll shut down. Al, you go.
That really is critical. We get lectured a lot. In the past we've lectured a lot up in the European Union about how terrible it was in Canada and dirty oil and all of those things. And we all have a ways to go to improve everything that we're doing here. But we also found at the same time that they were just offshoring into Russia, into jurisdictions that didn't have any regulation. And that's one of the things, if we do anything at all, it's to bring up, to elevate the whole industry. If we're doing it in Canada, but the biggest single impact we can have if we can take this and help elevate the industry in the rest of the world. That takes resources, but a lot of these countries, and especially developing countries, they don't have the resources to do things like baseline work that we're doing in Alberta, the kinds of work that's being done here. Canada could be a major source of opportunity for them just in taking our regulatory environment, which is well developed. Again, nothing's perfect here, but it's compared to everywhere else in the world, we're doing a good job, and we should be really proud of it and leverage that internationally.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll go now to Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. And I'm so sorry it's short. I was looking forward to this. I'll start with you, Mr. Mellon. If you could speak, please, to the role the federal government can play as a convener in bringing that venture capital investment to industry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think one of the good things is that the federal government's already doing a pretty good job of leveraging private capital through programs like SCDC, IRAP, SHRED, SIF, for example. These are all fantastic programs which are not only enabling the de-risking of some early stage technologies, which is being matched with private venture capital, but also attracting international capital into these companies. For context, 50% of all venture capital rounds in Canada now have international participation, primarily from the US, of course. And I think in many cases, because they're seeing that their dollars going into this business can go significantly further than if they put them into other jurisdictions. I think one of the conversations which come up commonly in this committee and elsewhere is, what happens when technology companies have capital-intensive infrastructure they need to deploy? I think one of the tools that we've seen deployed with massive success in the U.S. as an example is investment tax credits. I'm aware that that's a topic that's been discussed ad nauseum in this committee. And I think that those are other tools that can further incentivize particularly project development and more capital-intensive technology deployments.
Thank you. And if I could switch to Carbon Connect, and either one of you gentlemen, if you could, you've already spoken to this, but if you provide more detail on Canada's role as a global leader in clean tech economy.
Canada is an understated global leader, and this is our problem as Canadians. We want the energy transition to happen. We want to go to renewables. It is absolutely going to happen. But we can lead the way as a resource nation with the best technology. So in specific clean tech stuff, not just policy and consultancy, we also lead out there. I'll let Al talk to that.
We, for example, we established 6 years ago in Calgary the Methane Emission Leadership Alliance. You know, and methane is one of those examples. There there are hundreds, as Darcy pointed out, 18,000 different facilities were reviewed to come up with a baseline. Many different producers, a lot of that background work. Then you need the technologies. Well, in fact, many of these technologies were in place. In my other company, we had a technology we developed 10 years ago in solar chemical injection. It's one of the most cost-effective solutions to reduce methane emission. But I have some competitors, but there are other technologies. We have over 44 members in the Methane Emission Leadership Alliance. These are Canadian companies that are out there doing it right now. Like, they're not talking about it, they're actually implementing it, and they've been doing it for quite a few years. That's what we have the potential to take to the international community. We're not starting from scratch. So in some areas, carbon capture, hydrogen, a lot of those areas, yeah, we have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of R&D, but in the methane front, we can hit the ground running.
Thank you. Do I have time for another question?
Yeah, you got 3 minutes.
Okay, so actually, Mr. Fitzpatrick, if I could switch to you now. As we pivot towards cleaner energy future that includes just transition for workers in coal and oil and gas sectors, one of the barriers from a labor perspective is that many of the jobs pay much better than other jobs. What do you think would be the best way to overcome this barrier?
15 seconds, please.
I would look to the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, as one tool to create and maintain good quality union jobs in existing and future sectors. They've put investments in across the board to maintain energy workers in their work, to train them to do work on clean energy, and to do things like build electric vehicles instead of ICE vehicles.
Thank you. Perfect.
That's an initial step.
Thank you. Madame Posé.
Oui, alors merci à nos témoins.
Thank you to our witnesses. It's really unfortunate that we have so little time to ask questions. Mr. Letourneau, it was difficult to get you here, technical issues the first time, and now I have less than 4 minutes to ask you questions. I was wondering if you were available on Friday between 1 and 3 because I could invite you to appear then. Your company has invested large sums in renewable energy since 2018. Kruger Paper has been investing on the success of a transition to clean energy in its own establishments without thinking about the new jobs that could be created through clean energies. Canadian institutions think that this could be the key to prosperity in this sector. Do you agree with EDC? You know, we're in constant contact with EDC. They also promote developers like us that can do projects elsewhere. The first project we did in Guatemala was a solar energy project that generated electricity that is used exclusively by a paper towel factory. Unfortunately, at the time, EDC didn't have the right mandate to help us out. We had to get American funding through American suppliers. However, our relationship with EDC is strong, and we are looking at deploying 20 sites in the state of New York, and we're in active discussions with them now. But this is a developer that will set up in other countries. Energy exports is a little more precarious. Prosperity for clean energy is possible here. Yes. Because so far you've talked about New York and other countries. No, but we have 300 megawatts that we have set up in Canada through wind energy. And our last project was a 24 megawatt project in partnership with Indigenous communities, the Mohawk of Kanesatake, and that was a great success story. Yes, and indeed, you have much activities in biomass, hydroelectricity, storage, wind energy, etc. What kind of federal support do you get in deploying these projects? For these solar and wind project technologies, these are advanced technologies, wind being more advanced. What I would say is that we need a predictable environment. Projects can last a long time. Between finding a site and selling electricity can be 4 to 6 years long. So what we need is an environment that allows us to move forward without a stop and go. Sometimes we'll have a 5-year span where renewable energy is good, and then people will think that there's a surplus, which is not the case. With the electrification of transportation and the demand on electricity growing, having a stable environment and predictable environment is the key for us. Are you able to measure the hydrocarbons that you've... Unfortunately, we will need a yes or no answer to this question or a written response. The answer is yes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses for this difficult exercise of speed. My question is for Mr. Kirkpatrick. We know that this energy transition needs to happen. We can't continue to do like we've always done because of the climate crisis. To change, we need to stop doing the things that we used to do. But there's no just transition if workers are not involved. We'll need to work with them and their families because they deserve our respect. In your view, what should the federal government do to support families and workers in this transition? How can we work with them?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that we've talked around workers a great deal with this. We've talked about the great Canadian technology and the measuring that's been done and those sorts of things, but those are all being done by workers today that are not being invited to these tables and conversations. They don't have the same clarity of the clean technology future that some of us do, perhaps, and they need to know that there's a place for them there. A lot of these families and folks are going to move further south to the States if jobs just continue to grow there. There's a new, as I mentioned very briefly before, the Inflation Reduction Act is a very strong piece of federal American legislation that is changing the landscape and switching the dominant forces of their economy from fossil to renewable or electric. And I think they're doing that in a way where they're talking about good jobs, the ability for workers to unionize and to maintain jobs within companies. So this is when we talk about clean tech and bringing people along, we have to talk about the people doing the jobs today that are cleaning up their existing sectors, but also planning for those future ones. And that's where we need the investments that have been discussed. I know we don't have much time, so I'll stop. And
2 minutes.
I was just going to also say, you brought up the just transition, and it's been several times mentioned. And the thing that this government has done is gotten the part of the way first. We've talked about emission reductions and new technology, but we've not yet done the job of talking to Canadians about how we're going to do this with them. And that's the part that leads to a lot of these political conversations and difficulties where we have people taking absurd positions because it defends a political territory. So clean technology is crucial for the future, but the person who built the first automobile rode a cart and buggy at work. So we need to make sure we keep those folks in mind and we allow them to help guide how we move forward as well.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. I think that it's clear that we need to do more to be with the workers. And we need an industrial strategy where we'll create good unionized jobs in this field. Mr. Letourneau, let's talk about renewable energy. You're an expert and you work on the field in the wind and solar areas. What is the potential in Quebec and Canada that is unexploited right now? I would say that for Quebec alone, there would be 3,000 megawatts. For solar energy, we have to be more strategic in our approach. I think solar in certain areas where the resources are good, for example, in the prairies, could be very profitable. But in certain areas, the grid is not stable. Combining solar and batteries would be a good solution to avoid our utilities from having to invest in transmission infrastructure or distribution infrastructure. I think this is, we have batteries on the island of New York where the utilities decided not to invest in cables and invested in batteries to make the grid more stable. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the meeting. To the witnesses, I would like to apologize for the reduced time, but the discussion was still substantial despite the limited time we had. As you know, you can always send us a written brief. These will be content for our analysts, and your ideas will not be forgotten or overlooked. We will take note of them. Thank you to the members of the committees. The meeting is ended. We will find each other. We will meet again on Friday at 1.
Merci bien pour l'invitation.